Here we go.
See where the boundaries of the frame are. I don't want to like be out of camera.
Welcome to episode 32, People of Portland and Beyond. Today in the studio with me is Jason Elwood. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Elwood, fine artist and illustrator. And so I'm just kind of getting going after about 2 years of this is my reboot 2.0, being an artist, trying to make a run at it. So, yeah.
What were you doing before that?
So I was in tech for about 10 years. I worked in. I started out trying to sort of pursue art from the tech perspective of like getting into Flash animation, if anyone remembers that.
Yeah.
And that was like, I guess that was late 2000s. Mm-hmm. And then that kind of progressed into software engineering. And after about 10 years of that, I figured out that the challenges I was facing with software engineering were kind of a result of trying to be a square peg in a round hole. And that's when I was sort of like, okay, I need to. Well, actually, I was challenged by my girlfriend. She says, like, is this really what you want to be doing? Are you happy doing this? Mm-hmm. If you could do anything, what would it be? And so for the first time in like 25 years, I was sort of faced with being honest about what I really wanted. And that's when I started on this journey.
Mm-hmm. You think it's easier to paint on a tablet than on a canvas or anything like that?
That's a good question. I mean, I never thought that I would ever be a digital artist. And, starting back in the 80s, there was no access to that stuff. So everything I did was analog, was pencil and ink. And I never even really got into painting, but it was charcoal and just, monochromatic drawing and stuff. And when I started seeing people that were doing digital art, I always admired it, but I always thought like, it seems weird,
Yeah.
And I just kind of happened on it by accident. I started taking some art classes over the course of the last couple of years. And I got excited about comic book art again, which was really kind of my passion when I was younger.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of artists were doing their work digitally. And so I at that point, it was like, okay, this is an investment. I was in like, this is what I wanted. I want to try to give this a real shot, being an artist.
Yeah.
And so I bought a tablet. I invested in the iPad Pro, got an Apple Pencil, watched all the tutorials, and started doing some comic book art digitally. And so to answer your question, like once I kind of got over the learning curve, I see a lot of sort of similarities between digital art and traditional art, but there's definitely some benefits and there's some, things that aren't so great, but I don't know if it's easier, but it's definitely, it's its own thing, it's its own kind of beast. And it definitely makes some things easier. Some things are more difficult just in the sense of like style. Like it's more work to get a work to look like a traditional painting.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so this got its pros and cons, but I'm glad that I kind of do both now, traditional work and digital work.
What kind of program do you use to work on these things?
I use a program called Procreate, and it's pretty popular now among like iPad circles,
tablet
users and stuff. Yeah, and so I did a lot of research, before I decided to kind of put up the money for the iPad. But yeah. Procreate was really kind of the big one that kept coming up for me. And so once I tried, and it's really inexpensive. Like it was like it's like $10 or something,
for the program.
Yeah.
That's crazy. There's like hundreds for those creator programs.
Yeah.
Usually. Audio ones specifically like Ableton Live or something.
For sure. Yeah. And that was the big thing too. And that was a big reason why I kind of went for the iPad as opposed to a lot of people work on like Wacom tablets and stuff.
Yeah.
And that was sort of one of the things I was kind of weighing. And, you can use your, whatever software you're using on your computer just translates to your Wacom. But I liked the portability of the iPad. And once I kind of saw the power of, Procreate and some other software out there, I was pretty excited. So that's what I went for.
Much about Wacom, but so you're working on something on your computer, it'll go to the cloud and you can just switch to your tablet pretty much quickly.
Well, it's like you can, use it as a tablet, except there's a couple different ones. One where you just draw on it and whatever you're drawing on the tablet comes up on the screen.
Live?
Yeah.
That's cool.
And you're using like Photoshop. You're like traditional software that a lot of people are used to already. So you use like Photoshop and Illustrator and stuff, whatever.
So you can be drawing and not even looking down. You're looking at the screen.
Yeah.
That is so cool. I mean, that could change worlds for artists. That's probably a reason I would, I don't want to do art looking down all the time.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And in a way, that's kind of the old fashioned way. Now they have them where it's like, and they're a lot more expensive, but it's like you can get where it reproduces whatever screen you have on your laptop on the tablet. And so you're looking at what you're painting too.
No lag.
No lag. And yeah, if you're interested in doing something like that, I mean, so there's all the iPad support like Procreate and the Apple
Yeah.
Pencil, but iPad Pro specifically, the reason why I went for that was because they're sort of like on a lot of tablets where when you're drawing, there's this gap between like where your pencils, your stylus is hitting the glass and the
Yeah.
actual what you're seeing as the image, and it can feel kind of weird. The reason I went for the iPad Pro is because it literally gives you the sensation that you're drawing on paper or on a canvas. Like it's the closest that I found reproduction digitally of traditional drawing. So
Yeah. Do you ever try to use one of these pen mouse things?
no, I've never seen one of these. Is this like a stylus or?
It's a mouse, really, and you can use it as a pen.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I've never seen that.
There's like an infrared thing kind of at the bottom.
Does it work on any surface, or how do you have to? Is it like a mouse pad kind of thing?
I guess mouse pad would work best. It's actually kind of hard to use, but I think it's better for artists because you can basically use it for art. It's harder to use as a mouse.
Yeah, I like it. It has multiple buttons on there. You can like program, I guess.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Definitely. Is there any digital artists that inspired you, or just regular artists? I guess if not particularly digital.
You know, a lot of my inspirations came when I was younger, like sort of when digital started really coming into its own. So, you know, I was inspired by comic book art. I was inspired by Frank Frazetta, fantasy artist. And that's really kind of what got me interested in art. And, you know, as I got into digital art, I don't know if it was anyone specific. I don't know like the popular names or whatnot, but
yeah,
I just started looking at comics and seeing that a lot of them were working digitally and, contemporary artists, and just looking at a lot of people that were doing digital paint, more like people I follow on Instagram and stuff like that.
And growing up, did you have more traditional teaching of art?
Yeah, I went to college for art, and I took all the classes. The funny thing is I had a big fear of like color and painting. So most of the classes I took were like charcoal, figure drawing, cartooning, graphite ink, that kind of stuff. And I really thought of myself like what I wanted at that time was like, I want to be a comic book penciler and inker. Like I didn't really have a lot of interest in coloring, or I had a fear of coloring, which was kind of a big leap for me. Once I got back I sort of revisited art a couple years ago, was taking a painting class. I felt was really important for me because it sounds weird, but that's the first time where I kind of began to face that fear of like, okay, a messy paint going on a canvas and having to worry about not just like contrast and value, but now color too, so it gave me some confidence with color and sort of.
Do you create your own palettes when you're doing digital stuff?
Yeah, a lot of times I'll try to maybe find a palette, or I'll find a piece that inspires me, and I'll break it down to kind of what are the main colors in this piece, and some of the education that I've received over the last few years has kind of, you start to learn basic things like, warmer colors and cooler colors and all that kind of stuff.
They have like go-to colors. They're like, oh, these are my signature colors.
No, not yet. I'm really kind of in the exploration phase right now. So it's like I try orange and blue look great together. It's stuff like that, warm toward the front, but cooler color recede to the background, that kind of thing.
Is there any artists that have stolen colors? They become iconic with these particular shades.
There are people that are really focused. It's funny when you start doing your research, and especially when you're using Instagram as kind of a platform for, not so much distribution, but just trying to get some feedback and get your work out there and stuff like that. You start doing any kind of homework like that. A lot of the things that you hear, it's easy to get caught up in all the different things you hear. There are people that are like very specific about their color palette choices. And a lot of it becomes like just, the perception that you're putting across the people that are going to be seeing your work. And there are artists that really focus on different palettes, or a very specific palette, like a limited palette. You'll see people that work like exclusively in blues or warms and cools or a lot of yellows and stuff. I'm still kind of in transition. I'm trying to kind of refine my work and figure out sort of who I am in some cases. I mean, one thing, I have so many interests that I can be kind of disparate and just kind of do work that's all over the place, I think. But I recognize that as a successful artist, the most successful artist sort of have a niche, so that's kind of where I'm not there yet. I'm working on my niche though.
Ever interested in getting a tattoo?
Yeah, I mean, I have some tattoos that I got when I was younger. Yeah, that's funny you say. That was one of the things too. When I was like, growing up and going to art school and stuff, it was kind of like, oh, maybe I'll be a tattoo artist, know. But I could never like bring myself to like put someone else through pain,
I feel like enjoy to see someone else in pain.
Yeah, like I'm okay with paper, but when someone starts bleeding on me, it's kind of like,
yeah.
yeah, it wasn't for me. But I do have a couple tattoos, so yeah.
Same thing. Like if you're gonna be an esthetician, you gotta watch everybody screaming when you rip their hair out.
I know, right? It's like, yeah. I guess if you get some kind of satisfaction out of that, it's like, you know.
Yeah, there's also the other aspect. You can console them and be like, it's okay. So
Yeah,
if you look at it that way.
it's true. It's about your perspective. But yeah, I can never bring myself to, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Said you're working toward your master's degree in fine arts. How's that going?
You know, it's off and on. I mean, like last term, I didn't even take any courses. I just tried to focus on my work.
Yeah.
This term, I'm taking a business class once a week over at PCC Climb.
Yeah.
And that's actually been really great. I'm sort of, you know, I'm in a way torn because I'm kind of starting over in a lot of ways, you know, kind of coming out of the tech world and wanting to get into the, you know, pursue my passion in art. And so I've had to really kind of weigh, you know, the pros and cons with, you know, how much time can I put into formal education, you know, or how much do I want to?
Yeah.
And I've sort of had this, you know,
with the internet, it's like, do you need to?
And that's kind of it, right? It's sort of like I was going to get my degree would be for like for pedigree reasons, because they, you know, to get into certain galleries, they expect you to sort of have a degree and this and that. If I find that, you know, I get to a certain point where it's a barrier for me. Yeah. And, you know, then maybe I'd have to look at it. But right now I'm just, you know, I'm taking the things that I feel I can really just advance my career, you know, and just not put a lot of time into things, you know, just for the sole purpose of, you know, getting a degree at the end of it.
Yeah, I got a degree and it was the biggest waste of money. I mean, at some point I came into money and I had to just pay off the loan, so it sucks.
Yeah. And I've heard a lot of that. Like a lot of people that I talk to about instructors that I know now and other students that are about to graduate with their BFA and transfer and stuff like that. And so many of them have just, you know, not horror stories, but just like, you know, just do it because you come out with a piece of paper at the end, like the process of it. In fact, I've heard a lot of people say it could be discouraging.
That's like a big scam, I think.
Yeah.
And that
if we're keeping it real, yes.
We're all sucked into this academic system and the world is changing. The internet has changed the world. So we really don't need it anymore. I mean, there's got to be a different kind of way to do it, not the way we're doing it now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would agree. And I'm sort of defiant in that way. You know, I'm kind of rebellious in terms of like, you know what, if I can't be accepted for the quality of my work, then I don't want anything to do with it. I'll just move on, you know, to some other gallery or whatever, you know. So we'll see how long I can get away with that.
Are you interested in perhaps putting your art in some galleries, local galleries around here? I know you said you used to live around downtown Portland where the galleries are.
Yeah. So since I've been sort of producing, you know, finished paintings over the course of the last like maybe 6 months or so, I've been in 2 galleries. One where I was kind of a co-curator at PCC Sylvania, their gallery. I had 3 pieces in there during the winter break, which was a great experience. It's the first time really that I had an opportunity to share my work, you know.
Yeah.
And then I was part of First Thursdays in February over at Gallery 101. Shannon Mole's gallery. Shout out to Shannon Mole. He's a great curator. He also works at PCC.
Nice.
And so, yeah, that's been a great experience, you know, and yeah, I would love to do more of that. You know, I want to continue. I'm trying to get to know some of the people in the area and just kind of building relationships and seeing kind of where my work can fit in around the community. And
yeah,
that's a big part of what I want to do more of. Yeah.
How would you compare the art scene in California to Portland art scene?
It's hard to say because a lot of the time I spent in California as an adult in California, like I was kind of on a different path, but
yeah,
I know San Francisco is a big market, and it's not just San Francisco, but like San Jose. I will say I spent a lot of time in San Jose in my 30s, and there's a great community down there. They have First Fridays, and you know, it's kind of, we have the First Thursdays thing here, and it's huge. I mean, not only do they like they block off the streets, but they have sidewalk vendors, and it's a pretty refined scene out there. I think they do auctioning. There's a lot of auctions. Obviously, you go around, listen to music, drink wine and stuff. And so I kind of got exposed to that scene, you know, maybe a decade ago. And so, yeah, I think the California scene's pretty big. I mean, it's a pretty big market. I think there's a lot of opportunity out there in the Bay Area, especially where I was and stuff. Yeah. But in terms of, I don't have a lot of firsthand experience because, you know, I was more into tech while I was out there.
What kind of tech again?
So I started out, I was taking a break from art, and a family member was kind of like, "Have you heard of the internet?" This was kind of like in the '90s, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I guess so. I think I have an email address." And she's like, "Well, you might want to think about like doing like web development." At the time, that was like super big. There was so many websites coming up, not enough people to build them,
Yeah.
and so I went back to school for that, and took HTML, and CSS, which was like the big,
Yeah.
thing out there, which is like so basic now. But
Still, it's important, right?
yeah, it was a lot of like hand coding and JavaScript and stuff. So anyway, when I broke into tech, it was kind of as a way to, um, still be kind of an artist, even though I was kind of on the fringe. It was kind of like, well, I still get to do graphics, and I started learning Photoshop and stuff. And actually, I started getting into Flash at that time, and there was a lot of Flash was huge. There was a lot of animated websites and a lot of just web apps and stuff like that. And that's how I broke in. So from there, I kind of felt like, I like the art thing. But as I was getting exposed to the tech world and I started seeing like engineers and programmers and stuff like that became really exciting to me. And so I got away from the art and really kind of tried to pursue a career in programming. So I felt like it was super volatile for me. Like I was self-taught, or I learned on the job.
Yeah.
And in the Bay Area, especially, working for a lot of startups and bouncing around a lot. I worked for art.com. I worked for a couple of big companies, a lot of small companies.
Yeah.
I really got tired of like interviewing every like 2 years for a new job, or 6 months. Yeah. And so I was like, okay.
Selling yourself.
Yeah. And like, okay, how do I grow my career? What are the gaps I need to fill in to actually, and yeah, and so, and again, around that time too, a couple of years ago, I started realizing like, okay, this just feels like a square peg in a round hole. Like I haven't been able to really find a home. Like I need to kind of rethink my career.
So you're also into portrait photography. Have you done any of that lately?
Yeah, I got heavy into that a few years ago. I don't consider myself a photographer, but there was a time I was doing a lot of film photography. I had a 35 millimeter, a medium format. I was living in Arizona for about a year, and which is a beautiful place to be a photographer. There are so many great places to take photos. And yeah, that's kind of where I got, I kind of had a passion for photography during that time. I learned a lot about photography. I learned a lot about cameras and optics, and I learned a lot that actually helps me now as an artist. Never really made a go at it professionally, and I still do it now. I really I think of it as a supplement for my art. Like I do a lot of the pieces I do now. I shoot photography, friends of mine and stuff like that will sort of be my muse for the pieces I work on.
Yeah. Have you ever done that with art, like portrait? I did a posing session for a high-low art space. They paid me like $40 or something.
Oh, really?
You ever do that with art? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like friends of mine, some people that I met in during the course of taking classes over the last year or so. We go out. I have an idea for a piece that I want to do, and I'll be, hey, can you come by? Let's meet in Portland. Let's do some do a photo shoot and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I'll use that as inspiration for some of the pieces I'm working on now.
Nice.
Yeah. And it's great. I mean, if you're not because I do consider myself sort of a portrait figure artist, because and I started in comics, and I'm not a landscape artist, anything like that, or an abstract artist. I really am kind of a portrait figure artist. Is that, when you're looking for reference, and inspiration, it's like, if you don't have a model to pose for you, then you're really kind of using, you're having to access the internet and, trying to figure out like, okay, what's copyright protected, what's not, what's royalty free stuff that I can use. And I can never find the exact pose I want, so having someone that's open to posing for you and shooting photography really helps that process.
Yeah. I'm looking at your latest Instagram posts, and it looks like a lady with sprinkles in her mouth.
Yeah.
Wondering what inspired this.
So actually, this was inspired by some things I get out on Pinterest. Is like a huge resource, because I go out there, I find like I must have 1,000 different boards that I save artwork to and stuff like that, just as I'm looking for inspiration. So I have something that how I want to express myself. And then I might see something and say like, oh, that's a great inspiration for that. And so I saw something that kind of inspired that. And I was sort of like, okay, again, a friend of mine, Gabby, from a class that I was taking, I was like, okay, I have this idea. Are you up for it? Like, so we went to she came downtown. We went to ice cream shop. I said, okay, pour all these sprinkles on your tongue,
Yeah.
and then I thought it was an interesting look, for a photograph and for a painting. So yeah, that was the idea. That's been one. It's an interesting painting that you pulled up there, because I'm still working on. That's kind of the one I'm currently working on. And it's
Okay.
been like a major struggle for me for some reason. I don't know if it's not being inspired or something about it. Once a lot of time goes by, if I have an inspiration to do a piece of work, if I don't do it immediately, I'm like already moved on emotionally. Like I'm ready for the
I
next
hear
thing. I don't know
you.
if you have that, but
I
it's
had
like,
a song I was working on, and it was like, "Don't waste my time," and I was just like, I don't have the verse lyrics, and it's been a month or two, and I'm like, I really got to get back to that song, or it's gonna disappear.
it's hard. For me, it's like things are kind of cyclical for me. I go through these waves of creativity and just different interests. And if I don't get to capture something as I'm thinking of it, then it's like I have to wait for that wave to come back, later. At some point, I'll be like, okay, what was that thing I was working on? And then I'll be inspired.
Yeah.
If I try to force myself, which is kind of where I am with this piece, then it's just, it's like a real job. It's like I'm working too hard at this. I need to do something else.
I can follow that logic, though. I did want to release an album by the end of the year, so I kind of made a deadline of December 31st, 2018, and basically I was working on the album up until the minute.
Really?
While everyone else is partying in New Year's, I was like, no, what's important to me is I finished this piece because I hadn't released anything since 2013, and I wanted something on Spotify. So it ends up saying December. I released it in 2018, which I wanted to say what's done in 2018, not 2019.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Just looking at Spotify, I was like, if it says 6-year gap, it's just going to be disappointing to me.
Yeah. But something about setting a goal and having a timeline too really can help you also, right? Because that way it doesn't kind of get put off.
Yeah.
And then your next thing you know, you're working in 2019, but you so want to be doing something else, So yeah, I try to do that too. I try to give myself short timelines, or at least something definitive, and say like, okay, I need something done. If I don't do that, then I end up in this situation with this painting. I took that photograph probably 2 months ago. And since that time, I've done like 5 other paintings. And it's just one of those ones, like I want to see it finished, but like actually doing the work isn't, fun. So, but anyway.
I saw that you had been inspired by some cover art, Frederick Brown's books.
Frederick Brown getting a shout out on the podcast. Yes. Yeah. I mean, so books have been kind of a big part of my life. I mean, it's almost to a detriment. I mean, that's been the one thing that I've collected. If you're going to collect something, it shouldn't be books. Like collect comics, baseball cards, or whatever, something that's going to have some value. Yeah. But no, I'm Joe. But I mean, so yeah, Frederick Brown's kind of like one of my favorite artists or authors. And there's a lot of great cover work. The big reason why I got into a lot of the reason why I collect books. There's a lot of it for the artwork. I was telling you before, like I collected comics when I was young. Wasn't because I was reading them, it was because I loved the cover art, and I would, copy these artists and kind of get my chops going with these cover artists and learning about comic book art and stuff. And so paperback art, especially vintage paperback art, really kind of inspires me too. And so that's kind of why I did that post. I do love Frederick Brown as an author. He's like my favorite author, but a lot of that art now, I don't know how people see it. Like if you show it to them now, they probably think it's, a lot of it is definitely, sexist, and there's a lot of things going on, artwork has definitely changed on cover art, but I don't really see it that way, just because I was collecting this stuff for decades, and I appreciate it yes, I do see if it's sexist or not, I acknowledge that, but I just appreciate the artwork of it too, and some of those paintings. And I respect the artists that did that stuff, man. Like just talk about being on a deadline. They're just professionals. A lot of these people were doing multiple covers every single month.
Wow.
And full paintings, So anyway, I kind of use that as inspiration.
That's cool. Was there any books that you were inspired by growing up in particular? Like, what did you like to read traditionally?
So
fantasy,
when I was
science fiction.
Yeah. So I actually find fantasy, science fiction, mysteries, genre stuff, and a lot of it was classical, is more, well, I say not classical, but in the sense of like early 20th century stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of science fiction, fantasy. So, I mean, from that vein, not like Tolkien, because those books were way too thick. If it was a thin book, I could read it,
Yeah.
But this goes back to being able to keep your interest for a long time. But yeah, I mean, authors that people might know, I read like Robert A. Heinlein, Isaac Asimov, Robert Sheckley's one that was he was actually a Portland guy. And
Piers Anthony?
Not really Piers Anthony.
That's my brother was into. That's the only reason.
Really? Okay. Robert Silverberg is another one,
Tolkien.
I didn't read really much. So actually, I should take that back. I tried to read Lord of the Rings at one point, and I got like halfway through it. I mean, that's like a book and a half worth of reading. I really liked it. It was perfect for the time that I read it. It was the exact thing I needed to be reading. But man, that's a lot of time to be holding my attention. It's like I'll never read the Game of Thrones books. Even though I love the show, it's just that's just too much work. It's just so much reading. So I'll read the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, definitely. You were working on this Supergirl time lapse. You were working on that.
So when I first started, again, like a year ago, when I really started thinking like I wanted to make a push to, be a professional artist, what I knew was comics, comic books and superheroes and stuff. And in a way, I sort of unapologetically was trying to get some attention on Instagram, and doing some work. So I was doing the stuff like Batman, Supergirl, Black Panther, just trying to get some attention and some feedback. And so I was doing, and I was teaching myself Procreate and, digital work. And so it really, and in fact, the thing that kind of been out to take a step back, and I'll tell you this story, is that when I first started getting back into being creative a couple years ago, or looking at that as a real option for a career, I got into writing. And I started taking a look because, books are kind of my thing and and so I thought, I'll be a writer, and so I did a lot of writing. I wrote the better part of like 4 novels and wrote stories, self-published one on Amazon, thought I'm going to be a writer. And so one of the things I was working on, one of the pieces I was working on, I thought this is a perfect graphic novel. It just kind of lent itself to that. It was very current. It kind of spoke to the youth, I thought, of our times. And anyway, I thought this would be a really cool graphic novel. So, but the first thing I thought was like, okay, who am I going to get to do the art for this? Yeah. And so, I sort of go through my mental Rolodex. I've been in tech. I've worked in video games before. Like I know artists, like we can get this done, like I know people in the industry. After about 1 or 2 days of kind of racking my brain, I thought like, well, what if I did the art for this? Again, I hadn't done any art for like 25 years at that point. Serious, work. Yeah. And so that's why the comic book stuff, because it kind of started out as a graphic novel. And I thought, well, I need to get my chops up. I need to see if I can even do this. How rusty am I, Yeah. And that's when I got back in and started taking some classes. But that's why the Superwoman stuff, that's why the Batman stuff was really to kind of like, get some confidence around like, okay, I could actually do a graphic novel. But then what happened is I took a painting class and that derailed all that, because I was kind of like, oh man, I could see myself as a fine artist and I can really express myself and not just take someone else's intellectual property and make a story out of it. But like, what about telling my own personal story? And that's where I got excited about doing painting.
Have you thought about creating like your own character, superhero, or anything like that?
Yeah, that was actually a dream of mine when I was young, and it's something that I thought about. Was it?
I had drawn a guy, and he looked like Iron Man kind of, but he had a helmet, and he had this rocket that would just come out of his ass kind of. He could fly around with it. Basically, it was like a jet in his ass. I don't know how it worked. He didn't have legs or something, but it was cool.
that's amazing. That could easily be an independent comic. Yeah, one thing that really pushed me into wanting to be a comic book artist was I lived for a time in Tracy, California, and I met the comic book artist, or the comic book a guy that owned a comic book store, comic book shop in the area, just because I liked comics. And so I went in there, and I was kind of like, the thing to do back then, if you were an artist, and was to be like, hey, what if I did some drawings? You could hang them up in your store, kind of a thing. And so he was kind of like, I'm sure he hears this all day long, and he was kind of like, yeah, sure, bring some stuff in, we'll see, whatever. And so I drew some stuff, and I drew this. I kind of was really ambitious about it. I drew this Spider-Man, and I made it, representing his comic book store, which was called De Hoyo's Comics. And so I had De Hoyo's Comics with Spidey and all this stuff, and showed it to him. And he was like, oh, okay, this is actually kind of more than I was expecting. This is cool, Well, he had an idea for a story. And so he says, hey, I got this idea for a character. Why don't you go work on this? And so me being who I was, like I put so much time into like, training myself. Okay, I need to know anatomy. Like this is serious. Now I need to get serious about this,
Yeah.
and start working on this character. Well, that kind of fell through, he didn't, whatever. He lost his ambition and whatnot. And so like
Yeah.
it didn't work out. And so anyway, yeah. I don't know. I went on a tangent. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, that's kind of how I got started in like actually taking comics more seriously.
No, that's fine. Do you have a couple Instagram accounts or?
I do. I have one. So yeah, once I thought I would post my photography. So I did a separate one for that.
Yeah.
Which I ignore mostly.
Right. I hadn't even discovered it until recently.
Yeah.
Was the girl that you took photographs of, they were eating a sprinkle ice cream cone?
Yep.
Was that inspiring the other art that you were doing that I saw with the
Yeah. So
sprinkles?
well, those are the photos from that shoot. Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's kind of like, yeah, those are what I was using as reference for the painting I'm working on.
Yeah, I mean, do you ever sell these, or do you
No.
ever stutter like there's like stock photos you can sell? Do you ever get into that?
I've thought about it. I'm
Yeah.
actually sort of, I have a good friend now. We working pretty close together because we're kind of in the same place in our art
Yeah.
career and stuff. And she's done stuff like that where she's sold like stock photos and things. So she's kind of put that bug in my ear of like, hey, why don't you put some of, shoot some
Yeah.
photos and put those up and make some passive income that way.
I've always wanted to know how people can make money with the stock photos. Like it seems impossible to me. There's apps that you can download. I think I downloaded one recently, and you put them into contests and things like. I'm thinking you got to produce a lot of photos.
Yeah.
Upload a lot of photos, basically.
Yeah.
So it kind of, I guess people do it for a living. I don't know.
I follow this guy on YouTube. He's a great photographer. He has great content.
Yeah.
And a great YouTube channel. And he talks about how he sort of got into photography as a whim because he just thought, I'm going to buy a camera. He bought a cheap camera. I'm going to take some photos. It was as a whim, takes a photo, puts it up on one of these stock photo sites and made tens of thousands of dollars off it. And was kind of like, okay, this is cool. I guess I'll do this for a living.
His first try?
First try.
That's crazy. That's
I know.
Awesome. Just fell into it.
Exactly. Yeah. It'd be great if we all had that kind of luck, to like
do something like that. You're like, I'm never going to get chosen. And you just gets chosen.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. Well, and he doesn't know any different, right? Like, oh, okay. I guess this is, just normal,
Yeah. I mean, if that's his experience with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Why stop? Just keep going.
Exactly. So he's carved out a good niche for himself doing that. But yeah, no, I've thought about doing that, but again, I'm sort of in this mode too, where I'm trying not to get too distracted. Like it can easily get distracted when you start thinking about like, oh, but what if I did this and I could do that? And
yeah,
sometimes it can like slow you down. And so in fact, I'm taking this business course now. And one of the things that they emphasize really hardcore is like, carve out your niche. Like what is your value proposition? Like, what is the one thing that you're doing that you're offering some value, and stuff, and really refining that. And so I'm sort of in this mode now. I'm like, okay, I need to refine more and more as opposed to like, spread myself too thin.
So that you were inking a zombie on your Instagram.
Yeah.
So how many seasons of The Walking Dead have you seen so far?
Oh man, it's weird, dude. I hate to say this, but I haven't really watched a lot of Walking Dead,
So what kind of inspired that?
So Bernie Wrightson that was kind of a copy of one of his pieces. And I was just, again, this was all an effort to kind of work on my chops a little bit. Mm-hmm. And he's an artist from a comic book artist, primarily from like the 70s.
Yeah.
And he was doing like Swamp Thing, and he was doing a lot of those like horror comics and stuff, which I kind of dig. Like, and so that was really inspiration for that. Like I do like horror stuff, and that just happened to be such a cool image of his. And so I thought, all right, I'm going to see if I can produce this. So
nice.
That's where that came from. But yeah, and a lot of the stuff that you're seeing on there, it can feel really kind of disparate. In a way, I'm kind of like, okay, this is why I need to refine more. But it's a lot of exploration too, just kind of figuring out like, what am I good at? What things kind of stick? What do people respond to? What's the best way for me to express myself, and stuff. So, but a lot of the early stuff was definitely comic book related. And
I saw that you drew Deadpool and Domino.
Yep.
So you must be a fan of the movies, since you said you don't read that many comics, right?
I mean, I have seen them. Like, I like them. I think again, like with a lot of the comic stuff I was posting is sort of like unapologetically picking properties that I knew would get some attention. Okay, what's hot right now? I mean, I hate to say it, but it was really just to try to get some feedback on this stuff, as opposed to picking some obscure like comic book person. I'll be honest, like I have seen some of the comic book movies. as for comic book movies, I actually really liked what's this last one that came out with oh my gosh, now I'm gonna space out on it. The sequel's coming out pretty soon.
Infinity
Everyone's
War?
yelling at the radio. Thank you. I love that movie.
Just
Like, it's so
watching it.
cool. Very
Yeah.
simple story, right? I can follow it. Like, it's fun, I thought.
Yeah, I think that Marvel has the formula down at this point. Iron Man back in Generation 1, they were kind of working at the kinks. Those movies can be slow and boring at sometimes, but now they're up to the 4th iteration, and
Yeah.
it's just kicking ass. Whatever formula they have right now.
It must be
Perfect.
nice to have, the access to the money and know that you're going to have a built-in fan base that you can just figure it out as you're going. And yeah, it definitely
Yeah.
seems like now they're just like, they got it nailed.
It's definitely important for them to get that cinematic universe going. Just like the Marvel comics, they want to connect everything to something else. And DC doesn't really care as much, even though I really did like that Justice League movie.
I didn't see
That was
that
really
one.
cool. It was supposed to be right after the Batman vs. Superman sequel. It takes place after that, which I didn't see. I tried watching 10 minutes of it, and I was just like, nope. Some people like it, but whatever. Either
I saw
way,
Batman vs Superman. I know that was one that most people hated.
man, you should watch the one right after that, Justice League. So much better. They have Wonder Woman. They have they have pretty much all the cool DC heroes. It's really cool, man. I mean, I don't know why. I almost like that one better. I watched it on the plane, maybe because I was held captive.
Yeah.
But
my son loves that stuff. Like, he's always telling me, like, go see Deadpool, go see Black Panther, go see Avengers, and stuff. And like, sometimes for me, like, I have to be in the right mental state, I guess. It's like, I saw Doctor Strange, and I just wasn't the time for me. I was kind of, man, this is okay.
Some of them are like that, but there's a few that you should just absolutely watch. And, Infinity
Justice
War,
League, okay.
Thor Ragnarok. That one you should check out. I mean, I just for some reason think it stands a cut above the rest. Maybe it's because they had Led Zeppelin. They have Led Zeppelin's Achilles' Last Stand in it. Maybe, I don't know.
Okay, I saw and some of the stuff I've seen. Like, I've seen the first Thor. I saw like the Hulk back in the day. I've seen the Spider-Man movies. I really like that Spider-Man animated film. Have you seen that?
Oh yeah, I just saw it recently.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. Like, that was a fun one.
Did you like the art direction for that? Or the story better? What did you like about
it? I liked the art of it. I thought the story was cool. I'll be honest, like, if it's a simple story I can follow, like, that's better for me. If I have to watch 10 movies to kind of follow it, then I start to get turned off.
Yeah.
I did like it. In a way, I sort of have a bias. I've always said, in a way, I think, like, comic book heroes kind of, and a lot of people are going to hate me for this, but I feel like they belong in comic books, or I love to see them animated. There's something about this is why they didn't do like live action comics for a long time, right? Because when they tried it, it never worked. They didn't have the special effects to support it and stuff.
Exactly.
Now you can watch a superhero movie and actually they pull it off well in Hollywood, right? But I don't know, something about, did you ever watch like the Batman animated series and stuff?
Yeah, of course.
I just think there's something about having it remain in the animated world that feels more authentic to me. As soon as I see actors, especially people I know up there playing like Atman and superhero and stuff, I don't know. It can be challenging for me to get into.
Yeah, I can hear you on that, but they do a lot of digital effects, so it almost half and half,
Yep.
Especially the early Spider-Man, it was just like it's like you're watching a cartoon, like one of the first movies of Spider-Man.
I remember the one back in the day where they like dragging this guy across the floor on a string to get him to look like he's walking up a, and he has the cheesy outfit and stuff. This guy's not even in shape,
Yeah.
And that was funny. But I think that was what stuck with people for a long time. Like, okay, this is what happens when you try to make a superhero movie.
Yeah.
They definitely have come a long way. And I'm coming around. I saw Infinity War. I love it. I have a plan. The second one comes out on my son's birthday. So I'm like, okay, this is what we're doing. We're going to go see the second Infinity War, the sequel. So I'm stoked about it.
Nice. Yeah, I'm going to watch that too. That's like one of the only movies I watched when it came out. Like,
oh, really?
The first one, yeah, the Infinity War. I was just like, I'm going to actually go out and see this because it was so huge at the time. I was like, everybody's watching this and I don't want it to get spoiled or something, I guess. That happened to me with Star Wars.
I hate that. I hate spoilers.
I was watching a hockey game at the time when I was in LA and I was into the Kings at the time. Yeah, front runner. And then at some point, some guy run in the chat and he's like, oh, by the way, I'm not even going to spoil it on the podcast. This so-and-so character, this is what happens to him. And I was devastated because that's the main thing that happened.
Harsh.
Yeah.
I don't even like to spoil it now. Like everyone's already seen, like everyone knows what happens to Han Solo and Star
Yeah,
Wars,
I didn't
right?
want to
But
spoil
I don't
it.
even
Yeah,
want to talk about it
exactly.
ever. Just for people that haven't seen that, like they want to be
Exactly.
surprised. I don't want to know anything when I go into a movie. Like if someone says, "Oh, have you seen this movie? It's pretty cool. Here's the trailer." I'm like, I don't even want to watch the trailer.
Yeah.
Like if you're saying it's good, then I'm gonna go see it and be completely surprised. You know?
Yeah, and if you've ever spoiled anything yourself, you know how devastating it is. I did spoil it for someone in LA, and it totally slipped out, and I was like, "Fuck, I feel so
I
bad."
know. Especially when it comes to Star Wars stuff, man. A comic book is like people don't mess around. Like
I know,
you
and
can lose friends over that.
that's like a major storyline, and it's something that this character was around forever, and something like that gets spoiled. It crushes you.
It's brutal.
I saw on your Instagram you draw Tracer on Overwatch. Was it that you played Overwatch? Was it your son?
Man, I feel like such a poser. All these questions about like.
Well, you get inspired by the visual stuff you
I
see, so you don't
do.
actually have to be into
And
it.
it kind of goes back to, collecting comics when I was younger. Like, and I again feel like kind of a poser, but I wasn't reading those really. I was attracted to the artwork.
Collecting the art.
Yeah, like I loved the covers and stuff. I would stare at those things for hours, and the covers were always better than the interiors, although some had some really good interior artists too. But
Yeah.
Tracer was just another one of those things that was really kind of inspiring visually. I think she's a really cool character, and I thought like this is something I'd like to kind of do.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't play Overwatch, but I mean, but there are things that I am into, around that. Same thing with like comics. There are comics that I like. There are video games that I like. I mean, I was addicted to Warcraft for like 2 years, World of Warcraft. Oh, 90. So it capped at 90 at that time. I think it goes higher now, but
I made it to 60 before. I didn't get into any of the expansions really.
Yeah. I remember that, like they call it vanilla. I think it's that first iteration of Warcraft, which is when I got into it.
Yeah.
I could never level up to 60. It was just, I was too busy grinding. Like I wasn't doing quests. I didn't get how to like level up, spent hours.
It was all about getting that epic mount.
Oh, for sure. That was so cool.
And it's by the time, I don't know if I got it or it's like I just stopped playing like as soon as I got the mount or something.
Yeah.
It's like I just got bored of it. I don't know how people can keep. There's still people that are playing World of Warcraft from 10 years ago. Like the game came out in 2004, and I always thought the graphics were antiquated, and that was 5 years ago. So I can't imagine what they're like now. They're not redoing the whole graphical system, right?
Yeah.
People aren't playing it for the art, I guess, though.
There's just something about it, that world. It definitely sucked me in. Like I know people, that I've worked with that'll be like, yeah, I have like, capped like every character. I've done every quest in every area. Like they just spend so much. I have they buy all of the stuff offline. Like I have 50 different mounts. They've dumped so much time and money into that stuff. Yeah. So, but yeah, I got addicted to that for a while. And I mean, I'm a product of video games. Like I grew up with video games and comics and cartoons and stuff as a kid. So it's sort of nostalgic for me. I haven't kept up with it as much, but I still have. There's still part of me that has an affection for that.
I think people in the art world are more drawn to MMOs.
Yeah.
Really?
Why
is that?
I don't know. I think anything artistic, kind of draws you in. I was never like into text-based games, for example. Like if it had cool graphics, I was like, oh, okay, this is cool.
There's a lot of lore in that game. And MMOs, there's a lot of lore, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe you can get some artwork from all the designs they have and stuff.
Yeah.
But World of Warcraft is just so generic in some ways. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's better games, I guess, now. Like I never got into the Final Fantasy MMOs. I thought those were not done well. I don't know. Final Fantasy 11. Is there any games you're playing right now?
No, there's not.
What about growing up? Did you play a Nintendo and Super Nintendo or
so? When I was a kid, I go back as far as Atari 2600.
Oh,
That's why I got one for Christmas when I was like 10 or something.
Yeah.
And dude, it was all about Missile Command, Space Invaders, Pac-Man, all the I love and arcade games. Like I was just in arcades constantly playing games at the 7-Eleven, so I came up when all that stuff was so popular and stuff. So I played Nintendo, but sort of by the time that started kind of iterating into like Super Nintendo and all that stuff started coming out, I was almost kind of already done with it at that point. And then, I'd come back every once in a while. Like I'd be, I want to play some games. Because you see how much it advanced over the years. It was kind of like, wow, now I need a PlayStation. You're talking about Final Fantasy. Like I think Final Fantasy 7 was the big one with PlayStation, man. People still talk about that game. Yeah. I loved that game. Resident Evil, the Lara Croft games, And then I would take another break and I'd get busy and like, I can't be playing games.
I mean, it's better that you're not into video games as a producing artist. I think. I feel that way as a musician. Like, I was so into video games 10 years ago. It's like distracting me from making music big time. I was like, I'd rather just sit on the couch and enjoy something being brought to me than what benefit am I getting out of making stuff? Like, you second guess yourself after a while if you get too recreational.
That's the thing with all this stuff, in a way. It's like, yeah, okay, I say I feel like a poser, like, but it's part of it is the just time management. Like, I just can't be. I know I'm gonna love that stuff, so I have to keep it's like an addiction, like in a way, like
it's a drug.
I can't be buying like a PS4 and a Switch
You're
and stuff
right.
because, dude, I'll be 24 hours, playing that stuff. It's like I have to like try to have a real life. I know myself, like I'll get addicted. It's great. I love that stuff. If I started playing Overwatch, it'd be over. Like that's all I would do, So that's why I don't have a lot of experience with that stuff because I have to like refrain, like so I just appreciate the art, and stuff.
Where do you think that discipline comes from?
Regret of all the years wasted.
Yeah.
When I look back at like, what I should have been doing when I was playing World of Warcraft, dude, I would come home on my lunch break and check the auction house and see if like, my skins had sold or whatever. And then like, I'd be like in the battlegrounds all night long. I was sleeping 3 hours a night. I would tell my friends at work and stuff, I'd be so tired. Like, what's going on? I'm like, I'm trying to get myself to live on 3 hours a night. I heard it's possible. Like and so, and you look back at that and say like, man, what could I have been doing that was way more productive and constructive? And so that's what's kind of.
Plus, it's like nowadays I'm older. I'm like, I'm not even going to waste my hand time on things that don't deserve it. Like, because the more you use your body, the more weird things like carpal tunnel come out. It's like, I wish I didn't use them. That's why I never got into being a PC gamer. I'm just like, I'd rather hold the controller and be comfortable on the couch personally.
There's some, I didn't want to bring it up, but there's something about too, like you reach a certain age and you feel like you're kind of looking at the back nine of your life. You're kind of like, okay, how do I want to spend the next, 10 years? Do I, how much time do I have? Do I want to spend that playing like, Final Fantasy and nothing against people that are into, and because I mean, it's super fun. And I can see like, if I had the kind of job where I could come home and veg out, and stuff like that, then great, do what you want with your spare time. But
exactly.
I just don't have that luxury. So it's like, I really have to kind of pick and choose what I do for recreation.
Yeah.
And right now it's just anything that is sort of progressing me in my career. That's 99% of what I do right now. So
it's also another thing. It's just being bored, and a lot of times I would veg out and watch TV or a video game, and I would get tired. And I was like, why am I getting tired? It's because you're actually bored. And as soon as I switched over to producing something, editing a podcast, working on music, it's like, oh, I'm awake now. You know what I'm talking about?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, being creative, using your mind, and just it definitely feels more productive. There's something about watching the clock and saying like, oh, one more hour of gaming. It feels like an addiction. Like, it doesn't feel. It's that dopamine, sort of spike that you in the back, for me personally, like I know in the back of my mind, like this isn't good for me, but it feels like a drug. It just feels so good. I'm getting the satisfaction. One more quest, I got to level up, and stuff. And so I've been there and done that. I just have to let that go,
I think I was at that level, but at this point I don't play video games like that. And now I kind of even force myself. I'm like, I need to take a break just to relax. So I'll only play for an hour or two. I know a lot of people have the problem where they binge.
Yeah.
Maybe I have that problem with the Netflix series, but definitely not a video game.
Oh, dude, I know. That's the thing, right? I'm a hypocrite because I'll say that about games and then I get sucked into like Game of Thrones. I binge watched. So I never watched Game of Thrones, and I finally season 6 came along and I binge watched 6 seasons and got all caught up, got sucked into it, then watched the next one. Now, of course, we're like a week away. We get to see the final season. I'm stoked about that. But dude, that's now kind of my guilty pleasure.
Was it a multitask thing, or did you actually like sit down and concentrate on the Game of Thrones episodes?
Yeah, I mean, it was over a period of time, but I mean, it was every day we were watching, a couple episodes a night and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Among other things, I mean, like Westworld, I thought was really good. So
season 2.
Well, are you asking me if I liked season 2?
I am.
Season 1 felt like a complete story, and I really kind of liked that. And at that point, you're kind of like, where is this going to go? Season 2 was sort of its own thing. It almost felt like
I don't think they planned that.
Yeah.
I think they were just like, well, where do we go after season 1? They didn't write that season 2 out in advance. They didn't say we're going to go here for season 2.
For
sure. It didn't. It felt weird. And why didn't they just kind of they changed it so dramatically, you know?
Yeah.
They shouldn't have. They should have. Sometimes they did the same thing with Narcos.
I didn't see that.
They did 2 seasons with Pablo Escobar,
Uh-huh.
and then the thing is, he's supposed to be alive for 14 years. And
Yeah.
so I was like, great, we're gonna get like 14 seasons of this? No. It's like no more Pablo Escobar season 3. You're like, that fast forwarded real quick. It's like, why don't you sometimes I think people were disappointed. There's a show called The Killing, and they didn't solve the crime in the first season. Same thing with Twin Peaks. They didn't solve the crime in the first season. People get impatient. Well, actually that story was best told slowly. So it sometimes pisses me off. I don't know.
It feels like there's a lot of factors. I totally agree with you. I mean, sometimes it feels like we have a great idea. Let's go in and let's start this series and see what happens and stuff. And so they get a season out of it. And that's like, okay, well, what are we going to do now? People actually like it. It was popular.
The network pressures you.
Yeah, and stuff. And so like maybe they didn't figure everything out at the time they started it. But also I recognize, and I've heard that, you know, reading like people that work in the industry and stuff is like how hard it is like to do a weekly show and actually nail it every single week. Like you're gonna have some clunkers along the way.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're watching a show and you feel like, how much did the story advance this week? Like it went from like that could have been like 5 minutes of an episode, you know.
TV used to be 22 episodes.
Yeah.
Things have changed.
Yeah. And especially when it's episodic and they're carrying these storylines for years. You know,
Yeah.
Lost was kind of a big one, I think.
I love that show.
Yeah, I did too. There's another one I binge watched. I didn't
even
finish
care
it.
where the
Don't
story was
spoil it for me.
going. I just like the characters that they developed, you know?
I think you nailed it. I think for me, it's the characters. If you like the characters, it doesn't even
Absolutely.
matter like what's happening. Like I'm just into this. Cheers is super popular. You like the characters, you know.
Yeah.
Friends, you like the characters, you know, and stuff. And just 2 examples of popular shows where I think they're very character driven, you know.
Yeah. It's all about I don't even know if it's the actors, how they're written. I mean, the characters, how they're written, or if it's the actors they choose, or it's just everything put together with the producers. And I don't know. Maybe it's just like the perfect formula.
It's a good question. You know what I think about that a lot for is the first Star Wars movie, and that's something that's been documented to death, right? And there's people that hate George Lucas or they hate the way the franchise has gone and stuff. And if you think about just Star Wars, the first movie, how many things had to happen for that thing to come out and be successful and stuff. And when I think about it, you know, when I really try to dissect it and I think, man, it's so character driven. We love Luke. We love Han. We love Leia, R2-D2, C-3PO. Like they had to bring so much to that. You know what I mean? And not to mention the music, John Williams and stuff, you know. How do you recreate that magic? We've been trying to capture that in a bottle for like 4 decades.
Right.
Is that really realistic? You know, because it's just so
capture it.
Yeah, like everything came together for that movie.
Just stumble into it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things are in the past, it's just working around the tools that they could work with. And you know, like the original Nintendo 8-bit games, they had 8 bits to work with, and how can we fit all this into the cartridge? And they had to go through hoops, and they created something magical by doing that. And a lot of the issue with modern stuff is that they don't have that, you know.
The restraints.
All the tools are there.
Mm-hmm.
So you're creating something based on what you've seen already. A lot of that stuff was just new, right? And exciting. So they didn't really know where it was going.
Yeah. Something about having restraints that really can make you be creative working within a certain, just a certain restraint. That's one of the things that everybody knew. Like once everybody has access to like music producing software, like anybody could make an album now in their home, right?
Upload a video to YouTube.
Exactly. Anybody can make a film, go out and get a camera for $200 or use your iPhone and go make, you know, but at the same time is like, there was a lot of like, well, just because everybody has access doesn't mean that we're going to have a ton of masterpieces. It just means more people will have access to it. And in fact, I think your point is right. It's like, it's almost like having those restraints and having to work within a certain parameter really cause people to be creative. And in a way, it's almost like maybe because it's so easy or you know, it feels like a phenomena. I'm not sure exactly how to, you know, break it down, but I mean, yeah, just because more people have access to the tools to do it doesn't mean that you're going to have a whole bunch of masterpieces, you know?
Yeah. I remember I did my best artwork in elementary high school, middle school, one of those. I was working on an Amiga.
Oh, Amiga. Yeah. Okay. That's cool. You had one of those?
And they had those in our school. They had Amigas right before, I guess, they did a switch to Macs and stuff.
Okay.
And I did. I remember you could press the tab button, it would cycle all the colors.
Yeah.
Did you ever work on one?
I never did. That was before I had a computer. Like that was like pre-internet when I started seeing them. You'd be in the mall and like you would just see like the Amiga store, and you'd go over there and all the monitors would be facing the glass.
Nice.
And they just have little stupid animations going on, like 3D, like the ball is like, you know, tapping each other and like guys shooting baskets. I was so intrigued by that. Like, oh man, like it felt like this is the future, you know. But
Yeah.
it was like Amiga. That was like the big name brand. Like if I had $2,000, I would buy one of these, you know. But I never
Yeah.
had one. By the time I got a computer, yeah, I was HP and everything.
So it was more advanced by that time.
Yeah, I think so.
So you didn't have the experience of working on those restraints.
No, I didn't. I know a lot of people that got into like programming early, like programmed like Commodore 64. And
Yeah.
I talked to people in the industry that like, oh yeah, I used to, you know, program with like tape and like program cards and punch
What?
cards and stuff. And I'm
That's
like,
insane.
that's cool, but that's I'm not
Yeah. My dad got this computer from a garage sale when I was a kid. I totally remember we coded something and I didn't know what the hell it was, but there was like a piece of paper that told you how to do it and
Yeah.
everything. And it made some cool It's like all that time and it made this one-page graphical thing or something.
a little ball bounce across the screen or something.
Yeah. Back then you're like, what? This is amazing.
I know, it felt so cool. It felt like the future. Yeah, we took programming in school. Like I remember being in like 4th or 5th grade, and like we had some computer. I don't remember what it was, but it had like Oregon Trail. I remember playing
Oregon Trail. I love
Yeah,
that.
it
That's
had-
my first perspective of Oregon.
Yeah, right.
That
I want to go here one day.
made
It's
me not
exactly
wanna
like the
go.
game.
I
Yeah.
was like, Oregon's like some crappy farm.
Oh, really?
That's what I thought. I was like,
I'm just gonna die.
I was like, it's like Old Yeller or something over there.
Yeah, right. I know. Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, it was that, and then it was like, okay, like what you said, like just copying, you know, a program out of a book or something, and then hitting enter, and usually it would take like 10 times because you did a typo.
Yeah.
But eventually, you'd be so excited because you'd have some ball bouncing across the screen.
Exactly. Like I just did that. I don't know how the hell I did. I don't know what any of these programming things mean, but I did it.
Yeah, exactly. And I at that time, obviously, I didn't have enough. It wasn't cool enough for me to pursue it at that point. You know, I had to come to it like 20 years later. But
yeah. Well, thank you for coming in the studio today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And maybe check in on the art career in a year or two.
Yeah, that would be a very interesting time to check in with me. So yeah,
Cool.
definitely.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.